Hello everyone, my name is Swati Moitra and my lecture today is titled Oedipus and the Plague, Reading Classical Literature in the Time of COVID-19. In this lecture, I'm going to talk about Sophocles' Oedipus Rex and how we might read such a text in pandemic times. The exigencies of our current pandemic times demands a closer look at the plague and the citizens of Thebes and reconsiders reading strategies for the same. And so in this lecture, I hope to speak of some aspects of Oedipus Rex, rereading the timeless classic in a manner that might be appropriate for this moment in history. Now, I say this as somebody who's enjoyed teaching Oedipus Rex in my classrooms. And it's from that perspective that I say that when we read Oedipus Rex in classrooms such as ours, undergraduate classrooms in India, we tend to read Oedipus's heart-rending journey from ignorance to recognition as the central aspect of the play. This remains the primary point of interest in our classrooms, as does the whole question, and I've seen my students respond to this in particular. Is Oedipus responsible for his crimes? Or is he a hapless victim of destiny? This tends to cause debates in my classrooms whenever we discuss Oedipus Rex. But as E.R. Dodds pointed out many years ago, this is in fact a false binary. The play is both about human blindness to larger forces at work, of which of course Oedipus is representative, and it's also about human greatness and inner strength that allows one to pursue the truth, no matter what the price is. There again, Oedipus stands as a tall example of a man willing to eventually pursue the truth, even if it costs him everything. In my classrooms, we also speak of the Greek oikos and the polis, and the connection between the two. The house of Oedipus must come to ruin if the polis is to be cleansed of the plague. In such readings, we point out the fact that we speak of Oedipus Rex or Oedipus Tyrannus, Oedipus the king, that is in fact the title of the play. He is not an ordinary hero, he is the ruler of the polis. This is a discussion that frequently takes place in my class, where we debate the place of the king, the polis, what the Greeks thought of the polis, and what we might think of the state in our own times, and these have led to very lively conversations over the years. But when I speak to you today, I'm acutely aware that in all my discussions with my students, I have seldom paid attention to one of the defining aspects of Oedipus Rex, and that is of course the plague itself. Perhaps it's the pandemic speaking through me, but it's the pandemic that has forced me to confront with some aspects of the plague in Oedipus Rex that I myself had not perhaps looked at over the years. After all, it was a doctor, Ryan Emanuel, who recently wrote, and I'm quoting him here, he writes, our current scenario and the isolation it requires contains haunting echoes of Oedipus's Thebes, when it was ravaged by plague. In the opening scene of the classic Greek tragedy Oedipus Rex, the contagion's effects are evident as the streets lie empty, children are ripped from their parents, and citizens from their polis. A priest laments, "A blight is on the fruitful plants of the earth, a blight is on the cattle in the fields, a blight is on our women that no children are born to them. A god that carries fire, a deadly pestilence is on our town, strikes us and spares us not, and the house of Cadmus is emptied of its people, while black death grows rich in groaning and in lamentation." Is this not our story too? Think about this. Have we not watched our streets grow empty? Have we not seen shut shops? Have we not watched with horror as slowly the pandemic hits closer home? Have we not heard of crematoriums being too full, of hospitals piling up bodies, of families unable to meet their loved ones for the last time? Elsewhere in the world, countries as different and as much as at war against each other as Iran and America have found themselves united by COVID-19 as they both dug mass graves. Such a story, I think, demands a deeper, closer look. And so we must see where the story of Oedipus Rex takes us in the time of COVID-19. Now, plagues, of course, are not uncommon in Greek literature. If you will recall, the Iliad begins with a plague situation that kills the soldiers in the Greek camp. It is learned that Apollo is angry after Agamemnon's arrogant refusal to release his priest's daughter, despite the offer of good ransom as per custom. Mary Beard, the classic scholar at Oxford, called the plague in the Iliad the first pandemic in Western literature. This is in a very recent piece. And she urged her readers to remember that Western literature began with infection. It's a very interesting bit of insight if you think about it. One that makes an intimate connection between human health, human suffering, disease and literature. Something that we do not necessarily think about under ordinary circumstances. If we move away from literature to Greek history and consider something like Thucydides' masterpiece, The History of the Peloponnesian War, it provides an account of a real disease, a real plague that ravaged Athens at around 430 BCE. Thucydides, incidentally, is a contemporary of Sophocles, and they're likely to have known each other as well. We don't know how they knew each other because, well, no detail survives, but they were both prominent citizens at a time in Athens, and so one might assume that they had known each other. In the history, Thucydides tells us that the plague started in Ethiopia, perhaps. It seemed to spread inland from the port, so again, outsiders had brought in this plague to Athens as well. And at first, this was full of conspiracy theories. The enemy had poisoned the reservoirs. Its symptoms had sickness, retching, hoarseness, coughing. People's bodies became hot and tender. They had painful boils in their skin. They had a raging thirst. And as the disease took hold, healers, healthcare workers were particularly at risk. The poor endured very bad conditions. There was complete chaos, there was complete breakdown of social order, and people stopped respecting the gods. After all, they had seemed to abandon the people to their fate. The historian himself, he of course had experience of this because he had contracted the plague and recovered. And what was this Athenian plague? There are a number of theories. Perhaps it was typhus or smallpox, but the plague did have profound historical consequences because it had a significant impact on the state's ability to fight its war with Sparta. We know that eventually Athens would lose to Sparta. And furthermore, this horrible plague, it killed the greatest statesman of Athens at the time, none other than Pericles himself. And Sophocles and his audience, therefore, who also had lived through this time, like Thucydides, would have known the plague intimately. Bernard Knox, writing in 1956, had argued, and I'm quoting him here, please pay attention, it should be noticed that Homer, Aeschylus, Euripides and Androtion all mention the discovery of the truth, which is in the story of Oedipus, the point at which they would be expected to refer to the plague if it had been a traditional feature of the Oedipus story. The plague in Thebes seems to be a Sophoclean innovation. To the extent that this is accepted, the connection between the Theban and the Attic plagues becomes more probable. What is Knox arguing? Knox is arguing that other narratives of Oedipus, which of course exist and abound in Greek literary tradition, do not feature the plague. They feature a blight, but not the plague itself. And that leads him to argue that perhaps the Theban plague that we encounter in Oedipus, the Theban plague has more to do with the plague that happens in Athens than perhaps we imagine. In fact, Knox further argues, and it is a long essay, I will be providing a link to it with this lecture so that you can refer to it if you feel like it. He argues that it is clear enough that Sophocles is drawing on a literary and religious tradition which goes back far beyond the Athenian plague. The plague in Thebes has three features which are closely associated with supernatural forces and appear in religious contexts. The blight which affects Thebes has indeed three traditional features: failure of crops, cattle and human baths. But it also has something else which is not a part of the traditional blight at all: the plague. In none of the passages which describe the traditional blight is there a reference to a disease which attacks the whole population. The traditional blight is confined to crops, cattle and pregnant women. So what Sophocles has done is to take the traditional threefold blight and add it to the plague. Knox's argument is very detailed and something that we don't need to go into here in fact, but it should suffice for us to state that Knox makes a case for the Theban plague of Oedipus Rex as a historical allusion of Athenian origin, drawing an accurate picture of Athens ravaged A by the war, B by blight and C of course by the plague itself. Knox therefore states the date of the production of Oedipus Rex, which is again a subject of great debate, after a time when the plague had reappeared in Athens in a second wave. I quote, "If the Oedipus Tyrannus was produced at the Greater Dionysia in 425 or even in the next year, all these puzzling expressions are expressed. And not only that, they can be seen as adding to the effect of the play when it was first produced, a whole dimension of immediate reference which must have heightened the effectiveness of the performance enormously." Oedipus Rex, as we know, did not win the first prize, it actually came second. But the effectiveness and the enduring popularity of the play is perhaps most evident in Aristotle's Poetics, composed which at least a century later, where Aristotle sings praises of the structure and the beauty of the tragedy of Oedipus Rex. Now this, I would say, brings us to the crux of the matter. How do we read a play like this, composed after a plague that left thousands of Athenians dead? A plague that Sophocles himself and his audience members in all likelihood survived. Some of them, like Thucydides, may have even caught the plague and recovered from it. So one important aspect of such a reading must surely center around the figure of the king himself. The king or the leader. And I'm not the only person thinking this, because if you look at the opinion pieces on American newspapers in recent months, a number of them in fact are directly looking at Oedipus Rex and thinking of none other than President Donald Trump. Let me read out a couple of headlines for you. This is one from the LA Times. It says, "President Trump versus Oedipus Rex. Leaders reveal themselves in times of plague." Another opinion piece from the Times of San Diego has a headline that says, "An ancient Greek tragedy holds a mirror to Trump's coronavirus leadership." The Milwaukee Independent had yet another headline that said, "When plagues followed bad leadership, Greek tragedy of Oedipus Tyrannus is a lesson for Trump on COVID-19. Now, I don't advocate that you only read the headlines, of course, but the general tenor of the three pieces remain the same. A critique of the US president and his leadership during the pandemic in the light of Oedipus Rex. And since we know as readers of the play, it is Oedipus's actions that are responsible for the suffering of his people in the plague, I think you can assume that the same is being claimed here with regards to President Trump. After all, the United States has lost more than 100,000 people to the coronavirus so far. Now, why does such a comparison with an ancient Greek play composed more than 2000 years ago come so very easily in the year 2020? And for that, we'll turn to Mika Altola, who, writing about the politics of pandemic scares in 2012, offers us a very important insight. He says, and I'm quoting this here, listen to this: diseases interact with power in that they can be read as signs of illegitimating weakness or as demonstrations of unimaginable strength. The production of health has often been framed as a powerful demonstration of the legitimacy of political rule, and the absence of health suggests the existence of fundamental injustice and transgressions, not only at the physical level, but in the way political power is upheld. This should be in fact very evident from ancient narratives, where miraculous healings, strange curses, and strange cures, divine interventions to diseases abound. For instance, in the Mahabharata, Dhritarashtra's disability, his blindness, he's born disabled as we know, it disqualifies his leadership and becomes a larger metaphor throughout the epic. In the Ramayana, Hanuman's willingness to find the cure for Lakshman, the Sanjeevani, is an important moment in the epic, and a concrete moment of his incredible strength of character, represented by his carrying the entire mountain on his shoulders. On the other hand, if you consider the story of Oedipus himself, how does Oedipus really gain his power? The power that makes him so supremely arrogant and confident in his own abilities, and so well loved among the citizens of Thebes. That, of course, is the incident with the Sphinx, where he responds to the Sphinx's riddle and offers the correct answer, thereafter ridding Thebes of the Sphinx. What Oedipus does, in fact, is that he restores health in the city of Thebes and brings it new legitimate rule which it had lost after the unfortunate murder of Laius. Of course, the fact that Oedipus himself murdered Laius is the major source of dramatic irony in the play, but that's a discussion for another time. The act of restoration of health to Thebans, then, is directly related to Oedipus's legitimacy as the new ruler, and this is a point we must keep in mind. It follows then that the plague at the beginning of Oedipus Rex threatens this very legitimacy of Oedipus's leadership, which is also perhaps leads to Oedipus's prompt dispatching of Creon to the oracle at Delphi. Right? He doesn't waste time because he knows what's at stake. He takes pride in his intelligence, and he knows that it's not simply the lives of Thebans, but also his legitimacy as the ruler. His conflict with Tiresias, which is one of the important moments in the play, the first agon, it's not simply a product of his arrogance or blindness, but rather an acute awareness that should Tiresias' grasp on the reality of the situation indeed be more than his, it marks the end of Oedipus' legitimate reign in Thebes. The king is responsible for the health of the state, both physical and spiritual. It makes or breaks political careers, as it did Oedipus's. How that might play out for modern politicians is of course something we'll find out in the near future. But perhaps the resonance of Oedipus Rex for the American columnists in 2020 can be understood in the light of this discussion. It would be unfair, however, if we limited our discussion of Oedipus Rex to the king alone. As Dr. Antiel, whom I quoted in the beginning of this lecture, wrote, the plague of Thebes also speaks to the communal nature of suffering. Despite the modern fixation on individualized medicine, the current pandemic reveals radical individualism as a facade. We are social animals. A physician in New York recently told me the worst part about COVID-19 is that patients die alone, without their families by their sides. Experts recognize that the isolation experienced by mandated physical distancing is having serious mental health consequences, and I think many of us will identify with this statement. He's right, of course. How often have we been told that dealing with the pandemic is our collective responsibility? For instance, when we are asked to wear masks, we are told that it's not just ourselves that we are protecting, we are protecting others from ourselves. The pandemic has weaponized our bodies, and each and every one of us has the potential to cause immense harm, despite not meaning to do the same. Oedipus doesn't mean to harm the citizens of Thebes either, and yet that is precisely what he does, infecting them with the plague. And that, I think, brings us to another aspect of the play that I know I have neglected in my classrooms, and that is, of course, the citizens of Thebes, represented in the play by the chorus. In my classroom so far, we spoke of the function of the chorus in mechanical terms, the role it played in Greek theatre, so on and so forth. Removed as we are from the vibrant theatrical culture of Athens, the choric songs, without the music, without the dance, perhaps even seem like extra long verses of no particular significance to the plot of the play. And yet, is it not the choric songs that represent the voice of the citizens of Thebes? What do we make of this voice, and what they have to say about the relationship between the king and the citizen? I think it's instructive if we consider the very first conversation between the chorus and Oedipus, where the chorus says, "Our city, look around you, see with your own eyes." They exhort Oedipus to witness their suffering. Thebes is dying, they say. As the conversation progresses, they remind Oedipus of his past triumph against the Sphinx. And what do they say? Let me read this bit out. "Act now, we beg you, best of men, raise up our city. Act, defend yourself, your former glory. Your country calls you savior now for your zeal, your action years ago. Never let us remember of your break. You helped us stand, only to fall once more. Oh, raise up our city, set us on our feet. The omens were good the day you brought us joy. Be the same man today. Rule our land, you know you have the power, but rule a land of the living, not a wasteland. Ship and towered city are nothing, stripped of men alive within it, living all as one." The tone is, of course, very reverential, they're very respectful, as it should be when, citizens are talking to the king. But there is a distinct element of "or else" when they say, "Raise up our city, act, defend yourself, your former glory." Now, why must Oedipus defend himself? Is he afflicted with the plague? He is not, of course. But if he cannot restore health to Thebes as he once did in the past, what other claim does he have over them? A leader not respected by his subjects is no leader at all, for he has no political power over them. Nowhere is it made as powerfully clear as it is in the very first speech of the Theban elders. As Eric Dugdale points out, although Sophocles' play is not set in democratic Athens, Oedipus is nonetheless portrayed as having been appointed as king by the will of the people. And there is an intimation that his rule is dependent on their continued support. The chorus represents this will of the people, something that the Athenian audience would recognize intimately. They, unlike Thebes, were a democracy. The choric songs, again, though they lose their potency when we read them out or read it in a book, instead of hearing them in song, they represent the voice of the city. They represent the horror of the play. Now, let me read this bit out. For instance, this is just from the second choric song. "Death, so many deaths, numberless deaths on deaths, no end. Thebes is dying. Look, her children stripped of pity, generations strewn on the ground, unburied, unwept, the dead sprouting death. And the young wives and grey-haired mothers with them cling to the altars, trailing in from all over the city. Thebes, city of death, one long cortege, and the suffering rises. Wails for mercy rise, and the wild hymn for the healer blazes out, clashing with our sobs, our cries of mourning. O golden daughter of God, send rescue radiant as the kindness in your eyes." I think we can all recognize this sentiment. All too well, I think, as we watch the death toll rise. People are more than numbers, are they not? We look at numbers on television screens, but people who are lost to this pandemic are more than that. They're someone's wife, someone's beloved, someone's child. And a pandemic, as we are seeing around us, it strips people bare of that dignity. As cities become overwhelmed, health services caught between serving those still alive and disposing of the dead. Body bags piled up, crematoriums open 24 hours, mass graves. The chorus might well be speaking in our language here. And true to this sentiment, as the play progresses and the question of Oedipus's identity and his culpability becomes greater and greater, the choric songs speak of the uncertainty and the anxiety of the citizenry in pandemic times. For instance, after Tiresias offers his interpretation of the prophecy, this is what the chorus says. The skilled prophet scans the birds and shatters me with terror. I can't accept him, can't deny him, don't know what to say, I'm lost. And the wings of dark foreboding beating, I cannot see what's come, what's still to come. As the play progresses, the chorus finds itself questioning the gods themselves. Again, let me read this. Never again will I go reverent to Delphi, the inviolate heart of hearth, or Apollo's ancient oracle at Ape or Olympia with the fires, unless these prophecies all come true, for all mankind to point toward in wonder. King of kings, if you deserve your title, Zeus, never forget. You and your deathless everlasting reign. They are dying, the old oracle sent to Laius. Now our master strike them off the rolls. Nowhere Apollo's golden glory now. The gods go down. They are of course wondering if the old prophecies were true after all. But the questioning of the gods in this moment is a significant one. The anxiety and the terror of death translates into further horror for the chorus in the final acts of the play, where it speaks only in terms of horror as matters unfold for Oedipus. And in the final song of the chorus, it's not merely a moralistic piece of advice that they mete out for their audience. We would be deeply mistaken, I think, to think of it solely as didactic. It's a statement that's coming from survivors. People of Thebes, my countrymen, look on Oedipus. He solved the famous riddle with his brilliance. He rose to power, a man beyond all power. Who could behold his greatness without envy? Now what a black sea of terror has overwhelmed him. Now as we keep our watch and wait the final day, count no man happy till he dies, free of pain at last. Oedipus has fallen. Thebes has survived. And the Thebans, as they recount their own survival of the plague, they're offered a grim reminder that such horrors are seldom a one-time event. Count no man happy till he dies, free of pain at last. The survivors of the Theban plague speaking to the survivors of the Athenian plague, the original audience of the play. In these pandemic times, the voice of the chorus becomes a voice that we can perhaps recognize far too closely. Let me conclude with Dr. Antian, with whom I began this lecture. He writes, as a genre, tragedy aims to teach citizens how to bear and respond to suffering, how and when it is proper to feel pity and fear. The original Athenian audience watching the play would have recognized that if this could happen to Oedipus, whom all men call the Great, the same could happen to them. Tragedy instructs us to accept the limits of our existence. The coronavirus is a reminder of our vulnerability and our finitude. When the pandemic comes to an end, whenever that is, I can't predict what will happen to our world then, if we will be speaking as survivors the same way that the Theban chorus does at the end of the play. But if tragedy as a genre teaches us how to bear and respond to suffering, then perhaps the tragedy of Oedipus Rex can provide cathartic in these pandemic times for those of us who turn to it. And with that, I will end my lecture for the day. Thank you very much for patiently listening to me.